Night. This is a short series. It's a series of 3, and it's called Inlook, Outlook. What we're going to do is we're going to be looking at some of the correspondence of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and specifically the letters that he wrote to individuals regarding personal matters, guidance on personal life challenges, and things like that. In about 2 weeks, coming up is the anniversary of the day that the Rebbe physically left the world. Obviously, his spiritual influence definitely continues to have an impact even after all these years. And since we are coming up to that time, I thought it would be appropriate to study something from what he has taught and advice that he has given, and the way he has had an impact on people. Now, just to give you a little bit of background about the Rebbe's correspondence. So at 770 Eastern Parkway, which is where his synagogue was and is, and his office, daily hundreds of letters were brought to his door. People from all around the world wrote letters to him, asking for advice, asking questions in Torah thought, in science. The Rebbe corresponded with all types of people, from scientists to young teenagers. World leaders consulted with him, teachers, everybody and anybody, Jewish, non-Jewish, all different types of people from all different parts of the world and different fields, wrote to the Rebbe, turned to him for guidance, for advice, to hear his opinion on many different matters, including personal matters and personal life decisions. Many of these letters have been published, and to date, there are more than 30 volumes with over 10,000 letters which have been published, and these are actually just a small portion of his correspondence. So we're really talking about a vast body of work, all of these letters. And the Rebbe drew from the wisdom of the Torah to guide people, to answer people, to give insight on different world matters or local matters in a specific community. And always in a way that he was able to cater it to the specific individual that he was writing to based on their circumstances and the place that they lived. So there's quite a wealth of guidance and a wealth of information to be found in all of these letters, from communal to personal. And as I just said, we will be focusing more on the personal. So to start off tonight's topic, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd like to hear what you have to say on this subject. Society functions according to certain community standards. We call them standards or conventions. Sometimes we can refer to them as peer pressure. So the question is like this: is there an inherent value or benefit in societal conventions? Or are they just there as a technicality to help society function in an organized and pleasant way?
I will be happy to hear it in Hebrew, the question.
So when I'll try and simplify it. Sorry, Shiri.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry. I didn't understand.
So in a society, in a culture, right? We live among people, and there are certain ways that we behave that are the right way to behave. Okay, they're not written rules, but they're ways that we understand that we need to be in order to be pleasant to other people and to have a nice community and society. So my question is there something good about these rules or norms themselves? Or are they just technical things that we need in order to make sure that we're nice to each other and we have an organized group and that there isn't chaos. So would anybody like to?
But what you're saying is the same thing. One option and second option is the same thing. Because you're saying, do we need it, or is it nice to have I didn't understand your question, because both ways is the same thing. We need to have guidelines that people will feel good in that place and safe in that place. Like you need it. So I don't know if what I'm saying it's like scenario 1 or 2 that you said, because I didn't.
Right. Okay. So yeah, there is a bit of a similarity in the two options. You're right. So really, what I'm asking is there anything deeper than that besides for everybody feeling safe and happy to be among other people? Are there any deeper benefits for us personally as an individual in the group that we benefit from by having these norms or these proper ways to behave?
Okay, so I think yes, because if not, you won't be able to grow yourself, to put your focus on yourself. You always put your focus on the environment, how they should be and what they did wrong. And if you have a nice surface or something like to start growing from, so you don't need to put your energy about the environment, because you have a place to start focusing on yourself, on your deeper target like מטרות עמוקות.
Goals, yeah, your goals or your focus, right? Yeah. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, that's a great insight. Anybody else have something to add? Go ahead, Duan.
Well, this a particularly interesting question for what's been going on this last week. I guess that, when I think of societal convention, I also think of social contracts. So we have certain social contracts that kind of guide, how we live, and some of them are explicit and some are not so explicit. And sometimes, like what's happening, with the police brutality and the police murder, and then protesting and then looting, and I mean, when those contracts are in some ways broken, it's very disruptive, I guess what I'm saying is that you have to whatever you set up, it's like the Constitution. You've got to kind of always go back to it. Or the Torah. It's like a living thing. So you can't say that something that you have to always inspect what those conventions are, because they might not always work for all people at all times, and situations might change that. Just look at COVID. I mean, we're having to go around with masks, and so whatever. I just think that it's hard to think of it as, is it good or is it just a technical thing? I guess I think of it as like a living kind of a thing. It just is. That's the
Right.
part of being an individual living in a society.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but you also need to understand, like to question what you need to do and why you need to do it. So when you understand the why, it's easier for you to do it and to expect people to do that too. Because there is it's not like I understand now. People ask me, we are going to send the kids to the summer camp. Like when everybody will understand that that's our new reality. It's not like a passing thing. Oh, in 2 months everything will be back. No, nothing. Nothing will be back like before. That's it. That's our new reality. We need to start, like, you can't, just press, like push people if you want to press. No, you wait. If you're in the elevator and people inside, wait. You don't need to get inside and do, like, it's different way of thinking. It's different way of living, and expecting people to respect you like you respect them. So every time I think also the basic, or the expectation is changing, like life changing. You have the basic, the Torah, the rules that everybody know, but every day is changing, and you need to understand what is changing and why, and to accept it. I don't know, otherwise it will be a chaos.
Right. Yeah, it's true. It's very interesting because now we're having to question a lot of the normal ways of behavior that used to be completely fine and acceptable, and we've got to change certain things because there's some new conventions and new norms. So it's really a very interesting conversation, specifically in this time. We're going to hold the conversation that we just had on the side for now. And I'm going to present the first letter that we're going to be reading and focusing on in this class. And we'll come back to the discussion later on. So just to give you a little bit of context and background, in 1933, after Hitler rose to power, the Lubavitcher Rebbe and his wife, Rebbetzin Chaim, they were actually living in Berlin at the time. So when Hitler rose to power, they obviously wanted to leave as soon as they could, and they relocated to Paris. But we obviously know that eventually the Germans invaded Paris as well. And when they did so, the Rebbe then, with his wife, fled to Vichy in southern France. Vichy had a separate government. It wasn't completely under the Nazi rule at the time, although they were very sympathetic and collaborating with the Nazis. So it wasn't completely safe there either, but somehow in the beginning, at least, it was slightly better. So we can obviously imagine they were living there as refugees, constantly on the run, trying to stay safe in this dangerous situation, trying to find a way to survive. And there were many refugees there as well at the time, constantly coming. And the Rebbe actually made it a point to look out for those refugees and to do what he could to help them, even though he himself was in the same difficult situation. But obviously we know that as long as you have something to contribute and you have some way of helping out another person, it's a responsibility to do so. And that is exactly what he did. So for example, the refugees would arrive in Vichy, and they would need to find a place to stay, because if they were out on the streets and they weren't living anywhere, that would be dangerous for them. So where would they go? They would go look for a hotel to check into. But in order to check into a hotel, you had to prove that you had enough money to pay for the hotel. How did they want you to prove it? If you presented $100 bill, then they would know that you had enough money to pay for your stay at the hotel. Now, who had $100 bill? A refugee coming from Paris, coming from another European country, fleeing the Nazis? Nobody. But the Rebbe had one such bill, and what he would do is he would stand on a street corner, and he would notice the refugees coming, and he would stop somebody on the side and say, "Here, you take this $100 bill, go to the hotel, check in, get yourself a room, and once you've done that, meet me back in this and that place, and I'll take the bill back from you." And he would take the bill back, and he would go to the next person. And that's how he would help countless people find a safe place to be, so that they would have a higher chance of surviving. Now, obviously, things were getting worse, and it was critical that they get out of France altogether. And the Rebbe's father-in-law, who had escaped in 1940, he had been in Warsaw, and he had escaped to New York in 1940. He set up a campaign, and through a lot of effort was able to get his son-in-law and daughter, who were in France, passage on a ship to New York. So they fled to Lisbon in Portugal, and from there they took a boat to New York, and they arrived in New York in June of 1941. So actually the date of their arrival, the anniversary of that date is coming up next week. And they were literally on the last ship to make it out during that time. So this letter that I'm going to show you right now is a letter that was written in 1944. So it's actually about 3 years after the Rebbe has already been living in New York. And he's writing it to a fellow whom he had been with in Vichy for some period of time. So I will share my screen now so that you can have a look. You can see the translation of the letter. Okay, I'm just going to make this a bit larger. All right. Okay, so this letter was written on the 3rd of Hanukkah in 1944, the Hebrew year 5705. So my esteemed and honored friend, Mr. Dov Fedber, greetings and blessings. Okay, this is not the entire letter, it's an excerpt from the letter. Your letter awakened memories of the time that we were together in Vichy and Nice, each of us under living conditions to which they were unaccustomed. So he's remembering the time that they were living in conditions and in places that they were previously not used to. When a person is uprooted from their habitual environment, until such time that they become accustomed to the new conditions and requirements, there come to light certain traits of their inner character as they are in their purity, undistorted by the expectations of society. So the Rebbe over here makes an interesting point, that somebody who has been living comfortably in a certain place with certain habits in a certain community or society, and they're functioning in a proper and good way, but for some reason they're uprooted and taken out from that place. In this case, obviously, it was because of the war that he and his wife and many other people were pulled away from their homes. And the Rebbe says that in such a situation where a person is in a completely new and different environment from what they're used to, there's obviously a transition period. There's a time, it takes time to get used to being in a new place, to get used to the new situation that you have to deal with, to get used to a drastic change, which I'm sure many of us can be relating to some of the things that I'm saying right now. There's been drastic change. We've had to get used to new ways of living. And the Rebbe says that in this kind of situation, certain traits, certain midot, are revealed from deep within in a very pure way, and in a way that's not covered over by what society expects. Often, these traits reveal hidden virtues of the person. So the Rebbe is speaking very positively, and he's saying, when you find yourself in such a situation, these midot can show some very positive things about the person that the person himself did not know about before. So virtues that have been hidden even from themselves under the layers of manners and social conventions. So usually we have to behave in a certain way because of how other people expect. There's a certain face that we put on. We're used to behaving in one way in a certain environment. For example, in a workplace, we act professionally. At home, we're much more comfortable. So different parts of ourselves are shown in different places. In such cases, fortunate is the person who does not allow these traits to disappear when they subsequently settle down and find tranquility. So, when a person does discover some wonderful, deep character traits, wonderful, valuable, strong midot deep inside of them, they've had that opportunity to discover those. because they've come into a challenging situation, because they've had to deal with circumstances that they've never encountered before. The Rebbe is saying that a person who can hold on to these newly developed character traits or newly exposed character traits, if a person can hold on to those even once life becomes more comfortable and life becomes easier, and they don't have to deal with adversity so much, such a person is very, very fortunate. Obviously, that's something that is not so easy, and we'll speak about that more a little bit later. So, obviously, thankfully, there's absolutely no way that we can compare our situation to the situation in which the Rebbe had found himself at that time in 1940, 1941, as he is remembering and recalling this time together with this individual whom he's writing to. They were both there together at the same time. But there are elements that we can pull out that can resonate with us in what we've had to deal with in the past many, many weeks. We've had to be a lot more isolated than we usually are. As much as we're trying to stay connected with people through Zoom, through phone calls, I've even gotten letters in the mail because people have had time to do that. That's been something very sweet. But it's not in any way the same as what we are used to, and it's not really as much and as extensive as we would like it to be. We've been dealing with uncertainty. We don't know from one day to the next or from 1 week to the next how things might change. So experiencing a loss of stability and then possibly anxiety about what's to come because we don't really know what to expect. I think in the beginning, we all may have thought that, maybe for a few weeks we'll stay at home and then life will just go back to normal. And as time passes, we're realizing more and more that life isn't just going to magically go back to normal. God willing, we'll get there one day, but it doesn't really seem like it's happening too soon. So it's not just about moving into a new situation and a new environment. It's a new situation which is difficult and uncomfortable. Now, if we look at society, and we know from the way society has been set up for many years and many, many generations, human beings are social creatures. We're born into a family, we function in a community, we go to school, we go to work, we volunteer, we shop, we see people, everybody interacts with other people every day, or many days of the week at least, in regular life. And in Judaism, this is a very important value, this connectedness to another. There's the concept of Kol Yisrael Koma Shlema, that the Jewish people, we're all one structure and we're all functioning in cohesion with each other, each of us contributing something to that structure. I'm going to share with you something from former Chief Rabbi of the UK, Rabbi Dr. Lord Jonathan Sachs. He says this, he describes this with a very beautiful imagery, and I'm going to just read to you the quote from his book. So let me pull it up over here again. A letter on its own has no meaning, yet when letters are joined to others, they make a word. Words combine with others to make a sentence. Sentences connect to make a paragraph, and paragraphs join to make a story. Sorry. Give me a moment. Let me get back to the right page. That is how the Baal Shem Tov understood life. Every Jew is a letter. Each Jewish family is a word. Every community a sentence. And the Jewish people at any one time are a paragraph. And he goes on to describe how how we are the next chapter in a long and wonderful and surprising story that started way back from the beginning of time. I thought this was a very beautiful imagery, to think of ourselves as a letter in a word, and how we, together with the other letters, the other people in our family can make up a word and complete a sentence and then a paragraph, and how as one individual we can really contribute in a meaningful way to something that is so much larger and greater than ourselves. This is going to be obvious to all of us, but because we know it from our own experience. But obviously, when we are put in a situation where our social interaction is very much diminished, we're really lacking something quite important in our lives. We know, however, as we've spoken in different classes, that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was always a proponent, whatever the situation is that you find yourself in, whatever the circumstances are, even if there's a lot of negativity, challenge, and adversity, there must be something positive that we can take out of it. There's got to be a silver lining. There has to be a productive outcome. So let's look at community and social norms and conventions again, and let's try and break it down a little bit. And this is going to go back to the question that I raised right at the beginning of the class. Clearly, it's beneficial to be part of a society with norms and with conventions and with certain standards. It means that there's order. It means that we have a support system. It means that we have a place where we can accomplish and contribute. But we don't only benefit from being in a society and being among people. That society actually also makes demands of us and requires certain things of us. Some of these demands are wonderful. They can be motivating. We feel pushed to do something positive, to accomplish, to perform well, for example. But there are also some things which can hold us back when we are within the context of that society. It's possible for society to also restrict us from expressing something that's really inside of us. People can feel intimidated from expressing their true values and beliefs. They can feel afraid of what somebody might say about it or what society at large thinks about it. A person might choose a career path that is not truly in line with their calling in life because they might feel that society doesn't value that type of career. So here are some of the things which can possibly be negative. I'll just share a cute little anecdote which expresses this a little bit. So the first Jewish man was elected president of the United States of America, and he was very excited that he had achieved this historical milestone. And he calls up his mother and he wants to invite her for a weekend to the White House. She gets on the phone. He says, "Mom, I'd love you to come and visit me." She lives in New York, and she's an elderly lady, and she's not so excited about the sound of traveling. She says, "Well, I'm gonna have to order a cab. It's such a pain to get me to the airport." He says, "Mom, don't worry about it. I'm the president. I can get you a limousine. You'll be comfortable to get you to the airport." She says, "Yes, but then I'm gonna have to come to the airport and I don't know which seat I'm gonna get. Maybe I'll be in the middle seat and it's gonna be so uncomfortable. I'm just not up to it. I really can't." And her son turns to her, "Mom, I'm the president. I'll send you Air Force One. It's my private jet. You don't have to worry about sitting in the middle seat of the plane." But this old Jewish mother is just not convinced. She's like, well, then I'm going to come, I'm going to have to schlep my suitcases and go to the hotel room. And I don't like hotels. I don't know. It's, so many people have slept there, and I'm just not comfortable in these places. And again, he says, Mom, I'm the president of the United States. You'll stay in the White House. You'll have perfectly clean, crisp, wonderful, luxurious accommodations. So after hearing all these things, she finally says, okay, you know what? Fine, I'll come, I guess. The next day, she gets a phone call from her friend. And her friend says, so Sylvia, what's new? How are things? She's like, well, I'm actually going to visit my son next week. So her friend says, oh, the doctor? So Sylvia, there's a long silence on the phone from her, and she sighs, no, the president. The disappointment that her son did not become a doctor, or he did not become a lawyer, that Jewish mother's feeling of being let down, that her child hasn't gone into the field, which is the most prestigious amongst her community and society. Now, obviously, this is completely misplaced, and it's just to bring a bit of lightheartedness into the conversation, but I think it brings out the point where sometimes we get too focused on what people expect of us or what people consider to be the ideal or the ultimate, and we forget that there may be other things that are also truly valuable that we are more inclined to do or more talented at, and we should focus on those things instead. So really, we need to find a balance, because when we do focus on our calling in life and we want to follow a certain path where we can contribute to society in the best possible way, we need society in order to be able to accomplish that. We have to have something to contribute towards. Also, it's possible that we might need tools to help advance the path that we're trying to follow. And we can get those tools from others around us or guidance. I'm going to show you a quote from the Mishnah. And it's a little bit of I don't know if I should call it a tongue twister or a riddle, but I'd like to see if you can figure out what it might mean, or if you can try and make sense of it. So again, I'm going to just share my screen over here. Sorry, just a moment. Okay, so we have it here in the Hebrew and in the English. Im ein ani li mi li, ukshani la'atzmi ma ani. If I'm not for myself, who is for me? And if I'm only for myself, what am I? So I know this is a bit cryptic and not so clear. Does it seem to you to be a contradiction, or do you think these two things can actually coexist? What do you think? What do you think they mean? Please feel free to share your thoughts and ideas. Is there anybody who'd like to say something? Just if you would like to, please remember to unmute yourselves before you speak. Is it too much of a puzzle?
Well, it's very, this is, pretty, I've seen this before. It's a pretty much of a core text, I think.
Okay.
But I do think that they in fact only go together. I think if you took them apart, they wouldn't be, it wouldn't be the correct formula for, for self in society. I mean, you know, I think that that they, I don't think that they contradict. I think that, you know, they that they, I just think that they go together, and that, you know, in it is implicit that, you know, we have to, you know, the first part is about kind of self-agency, and that we have to be intentional about living our lives and, you know, meeting our goals and all of that. But if that's the only thing we're doing, we're not really thinking about the other, and we're not contributing to the betterment of those around us. So, and if you had just the second one without the first one, you wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't really be doing these things from a strong well. You know, you'd be giving to everybody, but, you know, it's kind of like that that Shel Silverstein book, you know, The Giving Tree, I think is at it, you know, where this tree just gives and gives and gives to this boy over his lifetime, and the tree ends up dying, you know. So so anyways, that's, I know I'm talking a lot tonight. I don't know why. It must be one of the problems that I'm like, I don't see people, so I'm hungry for just blah blah. Sorry.
I think we're all very happy to hear from other people.
Yeah, we are.
We're all kept, you know, in our own four walls, and it's refreshing to hear from others. So please don't worry. You always contribute wonderfully. And I think I like the way you put it, in the way that you explain that. So if we go back to the imagery from the former chief rabbi, and we think about the letter that we are. So if we think to ourselves, well, oh, I'm just one letter, it doesn't matter if I fade into the page. But then the word is incomplete and the sentence is not very clear. So we do need to understand our own identity as the letter that we are. And we need to be able to be a strong and healthy and self-aware and work on developing our inner talents and abilities. And at the same time, remember how that is contributing to and part of something bigger and greater, which is the word that surrounds us and the sentence and the paragraph. So now that we are in this sort of unusual time, which is starting to change a little, but hasn't completely changed. And we've had many weeks where a lot of the noise that we usually deal with is not there. The environments that we come in contact with, whether it's friends or workplace or a school or community members or neighbors that we haven't seen as much of, we've had that extra time to be with ourselves more. And as the Rebbe writes at the end of that letter that we read earlier, I'll just get the quote over here. He talks about inner traits that are able to come to the fore. So it could be that being in a certain environment or a certain society has made us look at ourselves in a certain way. Because even when we are trying to evaluate ourselves and figure out where we're up to, often we do tend to use the yardstick of the people around us to measure where we are. It's just a natural thing because our view is very influenced by the norms of what happens around us. And that obviously affects our understanding of ourselves. But when we take that away, the Rebbe writes, sometimes there are certain inner strengths or inner characters, midot or nitiyot, that come out that we never even realized we have those within us. I'll give you a very simplistic example, if you like, and I hope you'll be able to translate that into obviously something more meaningful. and deep. But just an example, when I was in high school, so I have two sisters who are very close in age to me. And we used to, as a school, the students, we used to put on a play every year. It involved acting and dancing and singing. Now, for some reason, I haven't figured it out yet. Why? I mean, honestly, I haven't thought too deeply about it because it's not that important in my life. But for some reason, I had this this idea that my sisters were the ones who were good at dance and I wasn't good at dance. I was the one who would be in the choir, or I would try and get a part in the drama. But dancing, I would never try out for dance. They were the ones who were great at it. And sometimes they made up some of the dances. And I just wasn't one of those people. And I knew that in my family and also in the school, my friends, you know, obviously it's sort of, you know, this kind of self-understood thing. It's not that anybody ever talked about it, but it was just, that was the way that I was every year, year after year. And fine. After I finished high school, I went to Israel and I studied there for 2 years. And I was in a school in Israel where nobody knew me, or before I had come, nobody knew my family. It was a completely new environment where nobody had any preconceived ideas about who I am and what I can do and what I can't do. And in this school, they also put on a play for the local community and nearby communities. It's in Hebrew. So I wasn't going to join in the drama part because they were doing speaking in Hebrew, and you know, for the audience to understand, it was just better for them to have native Israelis who know the language and have the right accent. But I didn't just want to be in the choir, I wanted to do something more. So I thought to myself, why not? Let me try out for dance. Maybe I'll enjoy it. And I was picked to join one of the dances, and it was really an enjoyable experience for me. And I had a great time, and I performed, you know, I mean, there's very talented dancers out there, much more talented than I, but I was just fine, you know, among the group. And it was a really enjoyable and wonderful experience for me. Now, what led me to think of giving myself the opportunity to do something like that? I was in a new environment. The expectations of me there weren't expectations of me. Nobody had, I felt more free because nobody had these ideas about me that I can do this and I can't do that. And I felt freer to explore different parts of myself that previously I thought, oh, that's not who I am. I can't do that. Now, obviously, this is not such a significant area, but it just is an illustration. When, you know, when we can sort of separate ourselves from, you know, it could even come from people around us who are close to us, who love us. It's not necessarily coming from a hostile place, from somebody who's out there to say, oh, you're not capable, you can't, you'll never be able to do that. It could just be people know you in a certain way. They expect certain things from you. And we're not usually going to do something that's going to rock the boat and have them turn their head and say, 1 second, you're doing that. Why are you choosing that profession? I mean, that's really not like you, for example. Or in a more spiritual sense, if people have certain ideas about how much we connect spiritually or we don't connect spiritually, or how much we want to do a certain mitzvah or how much we don't, we're not necessarily going to rock the boat. We don't want to turn heads. We'll just keep things the way they are. But when we can, you know, separate ourselves a little bit from that context and that framework and give ourselves that freedom to explore ourselves as we are without considering the way we reflect off of society and other people, we can really learn new things about ourselves that we never knew before. And hopefully we can, having that extra time, we can take the courage to actually explore those things that we discover and see where they might take us and what they might contribute to our lives. And then obviously, once we do reintegrate more fully into society, as the Rebbe writes at the end of his letter over there, fortunate is the person who does not allow these traits to disappear when they subsequently settle down and find tranquility. If we can hold on to those wonderful things that we have discovered during this time. And aside from allowing them to improve our own lives, then allow it to ripple out and have an impact on people around us, then that's something that is really productive, really wonderful, and really beneficial. And while we would never, ever wish for a situation like we've been through, the suffering, the pain, the insecurity, the different losses in different areas that people have had, all of these things which truly we are waiting and hoping and praying for healing on all these different fronts. But if we are able to find a way to have a productive or beneficial outcome in some kind of way, then we will have really channeled all this negative situation into something that is positive and productive and contributes to society. Obviously, this could be a challenge because the temptation is that once everything goes back to normal and we just feel that relief and we jump right back into the way things were before and we say, okay, I don't have to worry about all those problems now, and we just resume from where we left off. But I think we do all have that strength and we all have that understanding to be able to take the experiences that we've had and the understandings that we've come to and hold on to them and develop them and then use them as a catalyst for growth for ourselves and then eventually and hopefully sooner rather than later for the people around us. So this is just something I think quite meaningful, quite relevant that we can learn and take from this particular letter that the Rebbe wrote to this individual. And I hope it can give us some direction and some strength at this particular time that we are in. So I'd just like to ask you if there are any questions on anything that we've spoken about, or perhaps if any of you have anything you'd like to share regarding the ideas that have been discussed.